Very grateful, Presiding Officer. Well, how times change. Remember in 2015, when the then First Minister promised to completely close the attainment gap. Now this government simply aspires to reduce it. Then there were the current First Minister's warm words stating eradication of child poverty would be the single greatest priority for this government. Yet last week's debate highlighted that not only has the child poverty rate remained largely unchanged since 2007, but the SNP's multiple failures were having a detrimental impact. Now, I bring this up because of another promise, the one in the SNP's 2021 manifesto. Over the course of the next Parliament, we will make sure no child is hungry in the classroom by providing free school breakfasts and lunches to every primary school pupil all year round. Yet last week, we heard the provision will only be to P6 and P7 pupils whose families are in receipt of the Scottish Child Payment. Let's be very clear what that means. Not just now, Monica Lennon, I will take you later. Last week, John Swinney confirmed he was scrapping the SNP pledge to introduce universal free school meals for P6 and P7 pupils in this Parliament. Promise made, promise broken. And here's the issue. We know that the Scottish Government has never seriously tried to close the attainment gap. It doesn't know how to, nor has it forensically worked out what the interventions are that are required. But everyone knows our kids need food to be ready to learn. The Children's Commissioner said it yesterday. Going to school hungry is not only a barrier to learning and educational achievement, but it can severely impact development in childhood and into adulthood. And when it comes to eradicating child poverty, this decision will set back that mission, as the government has been told by Save the Children, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation and the Child Poverty Action Group. Monica Lennon.
Monica Lennon.
I'm grateful to Liam Kerr. I welcome his motion. I hope the whole Parliament will back it today. We now know that all primary school pupils in Wales and London have universal free school meals because it's been made a political priority. Does Liam Kerr agree that the SNP needs to drop the spin and the excuses in the amendment we've seen today and put the needs of Scotland's children first?
Liam Kerr.
I absolutely do agree with that. I think that's a really good point, well made, because the amendment that we've seen today is as predictable as it is shameful and indeed ignorant. On the 5th of September, in this very chamber, in a rare moment of self-awareness, John Swinney said, "We will not be able in this parliamentary term to roll out the eligibility on a universal basis across primary 6 and 7 pupils because our budget has been eroded by fiscal mismanagement." Hasn't it just? You see, Presiding Officer, this government is sitting on the largest cash terms block grant in devolution history. And as Monica Lennon says, this government makes choices about how it spends that budget. Never forget that the SFC just said last week the SNP's financial woes were largely the result of their own spending incontinence. And nowhere can I find an official costing for the extension. So to assist, I've done a very rough calculation. I think the cost to deliver free school meals for P6 and P7 would be at worst around £110 million. Now, in breaking its promise, the government chooses not to cover that. But what choices has this government made instead? Well, there are the £400 million on ferries, of course, but no one will forget the figures released in July, showing Nicola Sturgeon's SNP spent more than £180 million on spin doctors, foreign trips and hospitality. By total coincidence, £110 million of that was spent on press officers, social media and internal communications. And of course, just last week we heard about the SPADs costing millions. Then there are the more than 120 ministerial overseas trips in the last 2 years to more than 30 different destinations, despite, of course, foreign affairs being reserved to Westminster. Maybe it was to visit the 9 Scottish Government overseas offices, which cost £9 million, or to get away from the £16 million on losses and special payments by the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service. Or perhaps it was to get away from the £82.95 million in last year's consolidated accounts for losses and special payments. And if it's priorities we're after, some may have missed that Angus Robertson's budget of £347 million, you know, that portfolio that covers things like external affairs, constitution, things that aren't actually devolved, was spared the axe in last week's Finance Secretary Cull. Interestingly, for those who worry that £110 million is a lot for this government to find, Shona Robison, when asked why she hadn't cut that £347 million budget, said, "It is a small budget by comparison." Presiding Officer, by axing the universal rollout of free school meals in primary schools, the SNP have shamefully betrayed Scotland's poorest pupils. They've abandoned any pretence that they know how to eradicate the attainment gap and/or child poverty. And they have played fast and loose with the trust that the people of Scotland invested in them. You know, when the Scottish Conservatives first pledged to introduce free school meals for all primary school pupils in September 2020, we were supported by all parties across this Parliament, because some things are just more important than party politics. Just 2 months later, John Swinney, then Education Secretary, himself announced that this would be SNP policy. So, Presiding Officer, I call on MSPs from all parties to put the party politics aside today and let's send the strongest possible message to the SNP that they cannot, no, they must not abandon the young people of Scotland. Let's back the rollout of free school meals for all primary pupils in this Parliament by voting for the motion in my name that I hereby move. Thank you. Thank you,
Mr Kerr. I now call on Jenny Gilruth to speak to and move Amendment 14406.3. Cabinet Secretary, up to 5 minutes, please.
Presiding Officer, last night I met with the World Schools debating champions at Butte House, and Team Scotland were represented by Portobello High School, St Columba's High School, school from Kilmacombe, Broxburn Academy and Dollar Academy, and I want to put on the record my congratulations as Education Secretary to them on their success, and I am sure that the Parliament sends them our best wishes too. Now, Liam Kerr in his contribution says that some things are just more important than party politics, and I agree. And I told the young people last night about the topic at hand for today's debate. I explained that it would be a challenging day for the government because we do not disagree on the principle of the motion in front of us. And indeed, as the motion recounts, the SNP committed to deliver universal free school meals in the 2021 election. And I want to put on record our recommitment today to that delivery, because I believe emphatically in the principle of universality as a politician, and as a teacher, I know hungry children cannot learn. Now, what the amendment in my name seeks to do is to provide the necessary financial context to the situation we find ourselves in today. And let us be in no doubt that more children in Scotland today are receiving free school meals thanks to this government. Every child in primaries 1 to 5, special schools, as well as all eligible pupils from primary 6 right up to S6. Free school meal provision in Scotland is saving families on average £400 per child per year. And in total, Scottish Government funding is providing free school meals to over 270,000 children every single year from those primaries 1 to 5. And we are very much now focusing our efforts on those pupils in receipt of the Scottish Child Payment, which will see an additional 26,000 children benefit. But I understand the deep disappointment that universal rollout to primary 6 and 7 has been delayed, and frankly, I share that disappointment. So it is in that spirit that I will listen to and engage with the opposition today. Now, Presiding Officer, Parliament heard from the Cabinet Secretary for Finance only last week the full extent of the budgetary challenges faced by the Scottish Government. And as Sir Keir Starmer has stated on the issue of free school meals, the money is a big factor. I won't shy away from it. The Prime Minister is right. And of course, it is a painful matter of fact that under the current devolution settlement, in the absence of any clarity on additional consequentials, any emerging in-year costs have to be funded by cuts from elsewhere. Happy to do so.
Kerr, briefly.
Grateful. I share her deep disappointment in the Scottish Government's decisions, but can the Cabinet Secretary help us understand what representations did she make to the Cabinet Secretary for Finance to say, don't take it out of my budget?
Cabinet Secretary.
I made strong representations to the Cabinet Secretary for Finance, and if the member is interested, he can speak to her directly about that matter. But we are, presiding officer, in a parliament of minorities, and this question is not really one reserved for the First Minister, nor for I as Education Secretary. So how do we fund the approximate £256 million funding gap that I am presented with in order to deliver universality in this parliamentary term? Now, right now, the government simply does not have the resources to deliver it. So I want to hear alternatives from where I should draw the additionality that I need. Now, Pam Duncan-Glancy makes an intervention. I'm conscious of time, presiding officer. I'd like to make some progress, but I'm going to name Pam Duncan-Glancy here because she has actually reassured me here over Twitter that the cavalry are en route. I can't really accept a tweet from Ms Duncan-Glancy as confirmation of the extent of the consequential Scotland will receive from London. Those who hold the purse strings have offered me no such confirmation. And as the Scottish Fiscal Commission, Liam Kerr quoted, have noted, there is significant uncertainty on the level of funding we will receive from the UK Government ahead of the UK Government's budget on the 30th of October. I have limited time left. So I would welcome confirmation today from any Labour MSP in the Chamber on the totality of consequentials which they expect to flow to Scotland from the new UK Labour Government. And we know that the combined capital and revenue cost of universal expansion, as I referenced earlier, will total an amount of £256 million. So my question to Parliament today is simple, presiding officer, but particularly to the Labour Party. Where would you find the money? Because, like their friends, of course, in the Conservative Party, the Labour Party has opposed just about every revenue-raising measure this government has put in place. And just like the Tories, they want us to slash taxes on higher earners, leaving us with less money to invest in our public services. So what is the answer, presiding officer? If they were to commit to the immediate universal expansion in primary schools, which the Scottish Futures Trust independent research estimates will cost £256 million, then what £256 million of cuts will they make? Will they make it elsewhere in our schools? Additional support needs provision, the school clothing grant, the Scottish Attainment Challenge? Would they stop funding to the 8 new schools which are being built? Would it be cuts elsewhere? Would it be the NHS childcare, the Scottish Child Payment? Or would they do what they've been desperate to do since 2007 and reimpose tuition fees on Scottish students? Because that is the reality, presiding officer. Austerity is a political choice. It matters not one iota whether red or blue. The result is less money for Scotland, less money for education and less money for our children. In a parliament of minorities, it is incumbent on the government to engage with the opposition on the facts. So I will be listening today with the interests of Scotland's children and young people at the forefront of my mind. Presiding officer.
If you can move the amendment. If you could remove the amendment, please.
I move the amendment in my name.
Thank you very much indeed. I now call on Pam Duncan-Glancy to speak to and move amendment 14406.2 up to 4 minutes. Ms Duncan-Glancy.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and I'm pleased to open this debate on behalf of Scottish Labour today and to speak in support of the motion and the amendment in my name which I move. I've said this before, but it is worth repeating. Education is a great leveller. It can smash the glass, class and step ceilings in the way of opportunity, and any barrier to the full potential and power of it is a barrier to that opportunity for Scotland's young people. Sadly, though, with their litany of broken promises and incompetence in delivery, one such barrier to opportunity in Scotland is the SNP Scottish Government. The Government have now promised but not delivered free school meals for every primary school pupil for 4 years. Whilst child poverty is stagnant on their watch, people across Scotland will be baffled at the choices they've made. Experts are too. The Children's Commissioner said, any rollback or dilution can only be seen as a broken promise. CPAC said, the Government are falling behind on actions they have already committed to and that families desperately need. And Children First said, they're deeply concerned that the drastic cuts to public spending will throw many children and families already in crisis over the edge. And it's not just lunches, it's breakfasts too. As the Chief Executive of Magic Breakfast pointed out last week, despite being the Minister who announced it, John Swinney is now the third First Minister in a row to exclude universal breakfast provision from the programme for government. Alone, broken promises to young people on food would be bad enough, but they're not. In 2007, the SNP promised to cut class sizes to 18. They abandoned that promise in 2009, and primary classes haven't been below 23 whilst they've been in power. The SNP manifesto in 21 promised an increase in teachers and classroom assistants. Teacher numbers have fallen, and in Glasgow alone, against this Parliament's will, 450 might go. The same manifesto promised to reduce contact time for teachers, but a recent Government commissioned report found that they won't do this either. And it doesn't stop there. Pledging to end the digital divide, John Swinney announced that in 2021, if elected, every child in Scotland would get a digital device. This was dropped this year. Then there's the free bikes. And this year, Transport Scotland confirmed just over 6,000 bikes have gone out of approximately 250,000 children in poverty. And on the 11th of June, the First Minister said, and I quote, "Where families have debts about free school meals, we have written those off. But families are still being pursued, and the government can't tell us how many families they have written off." Presiding Officer, thousands of Scotland's children and young people who were promised all of this by this government have now left school. This matters, not least because people are sick of being promised stuff they don't get, but because broken promises to young people impact education and stifle opportunity. Because of the SNP's litany of broken promises and incompetence, attainment is down and the gap is up. Fewer young people are in jobs, education or training after leaving school. I'm sorry, I don't have time this afternoon. And young people from the most disadvantaged backgrounds are 5 times more likely to be unemployed. These aren't just numbers. They are young people denied opportunity. Scotland's once world-renowned education system is on its knees 17 years after this government's mismanagement, and they can't keep blaming someone else. So I have to say I find the government's amendment and the contribution from the Cabinet Secretary today to be tiresome. People watching are tired of excuses for not delivering the things that they said they would do. They can point the fingers all they like, but people in Scotland see the missed opportunities for reducing child poverty, incompetence and waste that's cost us £5 billion, and they can hear the experts when they tell them this is because of their own spending decisions. Presiding Officer, in closing, it is clear that the path to change does not and cannot lie with this incompetent SNP government. It must fall to these benches who are already delivering to reduce poverty through a new deal for working people, create jobs in GB Energy and improve finances for working people. That is the change Scotland needs, that is the change young people deserve, and that is the change we will deliver. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you.